the basis of the so-called Western canon while Europe was ignoring them, and they paved the way for the Renaissance. While it's important to remember that much of the world between Spain and the Indus River wasn't Arabized, most of it was so thoroughly Islamized that these days we can't think of the world we now call the Middle East without thinking of it as Islamic. Like perhaps the greatest testimony to Islam's power to organize people's lives and their communities is that in Egypt, 5 times a day, millions of people turn away from the pyramids and toward Mecca. Egypt, birthplace to one of the longest continuous cultures the world has ever known, is now the largest Arab country in the world. Next week we'll talk about the Dark Ages. Spoiler alert, they were darkest in the evening. Thanks for watching. Crash Course is
Let's give our panel a big round of applause.
Welcome back. Thank you, Mr. Majid. Thank you, Mr. Ali, and Brother Suhaib for everything. Now, it's my turn. Okay? You hope you will not get scared of me. Today, it's one of the topics of today is one of the most of the misconception about Islam is men abuses women to wear the veil. Okay, which is not true. Okay, and in matter of fact, in the Quran, chapter 24, verse 31, it says, "For who believe, do not display your bodies for anyone." Okay, I'm rephrasing in my own words. Okay, and a man should not force her to wear the veil, regardless. It's her choice to wear it or not. But if the woman believe in God or believe that Prophet Muhammad is the last messenger, that she must wear it, and she must not make her body appear to the other people. But there's an exception. The exception is she can not wear it in front of her parents, in front of her husband, in front of her father husband, and so on, and to the children. But the guys who do not know her, she must wear it. Okay, if she's a believer. And now, I let you know I'm not an expert about Islam. Okay, if you want to speak about ask questions about experts, these are the people, they know about the Islamic religion more than I do. Okay. Yes, I'm a Muslim. I can answer the questions at the best of my ability. Okay. And in another way, a man, let's say for example, a man, if you want to buy a house, a car, he must ask his wife to buy that expensive item. It is because it's so expensive. You gotta put that in your budget. You gotta consult with your wife. Okay? And the other misconception about Islam is the men, like I said, abuses the women for no reason, which is untrue. The man should treat his wife like she's the queen of the universe, and the woman must treat her husband like he's the king of the universe. Okay, but she must obey God, like of the Quran, to follow that message, how to treat her husbands and wives. Thank you guys. I really appreciate for your time.
I think that gave us all a pretty good insight into Islam. Perhaps there are those of you that have some questions that you'd like to ask the panel. There were some questions that were asked by some of the students that currently go to MSJC, one of which was about, and it kind of complements what Mohammed was talking about, is they asked, why is it that Muslim men can have multiple wives? That was one of the questions that perhaps is in the form of a myth. And are women considered to be inferior to men and considered a servant? And then finally, the last one was in regards to the veil, whether wearing a veil oppresses women in Islam, causes an oppression. So Dr. Ali or any of the panel, if you're interested in answering those questions, and then we can open it up to questions and answers. So if you have any questions for the panel, feel free to ask after these three questions have been answered. Thank you.
I'm going to take the veil part of it. Anybody here knows what is the first sin was committed by Adam? Raises his hand. What is the very first sin that Adam did? Anybody knows?
Killing the child?
Sorry?
Killing the child?
Anybody knows?
A form of temptation? No.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God ordered him not to eat from the tree, and he did. The first sin he did is disobedience. He disobeyed. That's the first initial sin. And we all facing the consequences nowadays on this earth because of that very first sin. Reason number one, Muslim women wear the veil because they were ordered by God to do so. And they were ordered by God to do so in Judaism. That's why Orthodox Jewish women wear the same clothing. It's a dress code by God. Same thing with Christian nuns. They wear the same clothing. It's a dress code in all religions because the message is one. That's one thing. So it's a concept of obedience, and the obedience is a very important cornerstone in Islam. Because like we said, submission and surrender, you gotta submit and surrender. I can't do this on my own. I need your manual. I want you to give me instructions. Because you are the one who even gave me the ability and charged my brain with electricity and gave me the ability to think. So even if I'm thinking, it's still from you. So I want your manual, I want your help. Tell me what to do, and he told you to wear the veil. So it has to do with the concept of obedience. That's what they wear. And interestingly, I spoke to a lot of Muslim sisters. How do they feel about wearing the veil, especially in this country? And some of them told me it's an empowerment for them. They feel they are in a complete control of their sexuality. And when people talk to them, they're not looking at them head to toe and their body parts, they tap them directly to their brains and their brains only. And this is such an Islamic beautiful way of empowering women. In different cultures empower women in different ways. So this is the Islamic way of empowering women. Have you in a complete control of your sexuality, and people will deal with your intellect and your intelligence only. Okay, one more thing. It works as Islam has preemptive measures, just like any human-made laws. Preemptive measures. You prevent the thing before it's happening. And the Quran says, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا in the Quran. Did not say do not commit adultery or fornication. It said do not come close to it. Preemptive measures. And said, tell the believing men and women, men before women, to lower their gaze. So men were instructed to lower their gaze. So men are not supposed to look, even if there's a woman around. So the burden and responsibility on the man is before the woman. Okay? So when they have to lower their gaze, it's both. They have to lower their gaze. So it's a preemptive measure. When you lower your gaze, when you don't look, it doesn't open the door for adultery or fornication. So it was designed, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered this for us, for the best of our interest. He wants you to stay away from fornication. And He wants you to stay away from committing adultery and major sin. I don't know if Brother Ali will add anything.
I just want to take the polygamy question, right?
Yes, sure. Yes.
The question. First of all, Muhammad was asked to marry a widow. So she, Khadija, was, asking him to become her husband. She was at the time 40 years old. She was a widow, and Muhammad was 25 years old. Actually, Muhammad married her boss. Okay? So, and he has been so, since then, he has been so loyal to her, and even after he died, he's very loyal to Khadija. And then you have wars, you have conflicts, so you have widows because of the wars, and then these widows proposed marriage to Muhammad for protections. So that's why you had Muhammad marrying, apart from Khadija, several widows after Khadija. Okay? So you have, some say it's 9 something and so forth. This is the question now. We need to understand that in history, in the context of the time 7th century. And Muslims then refer to one verse in the Quran, chapter An-Nisa, verse 3 and 4. I'll read you. This is an iPhone, but there's a Quran in it. It's very cool now. So you can check, anything, right? Okay. I just read you one verse that, that has been translated and interpreted about polygamy. Okay. Just one verse. Okay. وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ ذَلِكَ أَدْنَىٰ أَلَّا تَعُولُوا. This is Arabic. Don't worry about it. Okay, it translates to like this: if you are afraid, or if you are not sure that you can do justice to orphan women, it is about orphan women, then you can marry who is good among them, 2 or 3 or 4. But if you're afraid, or if you're worried about, or you cannot do justice to them, then only 1. Okay? So this is very tricky, because you can have more, up to 4, but if you cannot do justice to these 4, then only 1. So some say, Muslim scholars say, the polygamy is the rule, but others say the monogamy is the rule. It depends on how they define justice to the woman. And in reality, most Muslim men don't have, polygamy in their tradition. So polygamy becomes even among Muslims themselves, contested. Okay, I give you one example. There's one religious priest, Muslim priest in Indonesia, who's very famous, like mega church, priest. And then he married a second wife, right? And then his reputation is dropped after that. So in other words, Muslims, punish him because of his polygamy. So you see, this is quite interesting. So it's very contested. And again, about justice is the key. And very, very difficult to do justice, right? Even for one person, it's very difficult, right? But let alone more than one person. Okay? So that's, you cannot go like, well, Islam, really justify polygamy. It's not either or, right? It is not either or, and you have to be loyal to your wife, for example. So again, this is quite, yes, thank you.
May I add to that point, if that's okay with you,
Yeah,
Mr. Aldi? And by the way, in polygamy, okay, a man can marry up to 4, like he said, okay? But first, let's say for example, the first wife passed away or had cancer. He can marry up to the second one, okay? Am I correct or am I wrong?
You mean if she is sick or something, she cannot get pregnant?
If she passed away.
I don't encourage him to get another one. It's up to him. I don't encourage him.
I'm not married. Oh. I'd rather be single. No offense.
Okay, yeah.
Imagine if you have one wife and you spend your money on her. Imagine if you marry 4 wives. In Islam, you have to treat each and every woman equally. Okay? If you love the first one, you gotta love the 4th one, and in between also. Okay? If you give one gift to one, you gotta buy them all gifts. The same gift. Regardless. Okay? One is enough. Okay? And Mr. Suhail will agree, and Mr. Ali will agree, and Mr. Majid will agree. One is enough. Okay.
Thank you so much, Muhammad. Let's open it up to questions.
May I
What
just
kind of-
add one more thing?
Sure.
The Quran instructed us not to say anything that we have no knowledge of. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٌ. Do not say anything about anything that you have no knowledge of. And this is a very tricky question because Brother Ali mentioned one verse. There's another verse in different location the Quran says about the subject. It says, وَلَن تَعْدِلُوا وَإِنْ حَرَصْتُمْ. This one says, if you can be just, it's conditional. If you can be just, do a second. The second verse talks about the same subject, says you will not be just even if you did your best. So basically don't do it, okay? And what are the conditions? The condition is to marry the second, the first has to be convinced and agree to it sincerely. So if the first wife says no, and she cannot be forced to say yes, then you break in the laws, you break in the rules, you're not following the teachings of God, okay? The second condition, you have to be extremely just. There's a funny story in the Arabic culture about a guy who married a second. And he tried his best to be just and fair to both. He bought two homes exactly the same. He would spend one night in this house with this wife and the second night with the other wife in the other house. He would buy the same exact material to this wife, same exact material to the second wife. But when he goes to this house, she complains that he's more fair and just with the second one. When he goes to the second one would complain that he's more fair and just with the first one. So he got confused. So he said, okay, I'm going to invite them both, and I'm going to bring a nice tray of dessert. And he put some syrup on the dessert. It's called qatar, like sugar diluted with water. He sat down. He had the first wife on his right, the second wife on his left. He sat down with the tray of dessert on his head, and he invited them to eat. They both ate and went home. He went to the first house and he asked the first wife, how is the dessert? She told him the dessert was good, except you tilted the tray towards the second wife, so she got more syrup. Then he went to the second wife, so how was the dessert? She told the dessert was good, except you tilted the tray towards the first wife, she got more syrup. The essence of the story is you could do your best as a human being to be just and fair. And like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, you will not be just and fair, so abstain from doing this. And the other reason why it's mentioned, it's permissible, but abstain from it, because we humans questions. Why Prophet Solomon was a polygamist? Why Prophet Abraham was a polygamist? They are our example and our role model, okay? So these verses brought into the Quran to tell you, even this is your role model, he's an exception, he's a prophet. He can't do it. He can't be just with my instructions and my guidance. And as he's your role model, you're trying to follow him, you cannot do this because it's not doable. I hope I did my best explaining this one. I'm not a scholar. I'm just a student of knowledge, just like everybody else.
You did a great job. Thank you. Let's go to questions, Muhammad.
My parents are here, so when you go out, tell them hi. My dad is right here, and my mom's way in the back. Tell them hi when you walk out.
Great to have you all. Let's ask some questions. Go ahead, Gil.
I have a question. I think a lot of confusion comes in like the rogue activity that you see coming from certain regions. And one of the events that I wanted to touch on was that girl Malala in Pakistan, who is the 14-year-old activist that was gunned down by that Taliban. And I was just wondering if that was more like a regional thing, like a rogue event, or is that something that is taught through, not taught, but interpreted through some rogue interpretation somewhere?
That's not quite the question.
Oh, so the first that girl Malala,
Yeah,
the
I got
activist, the 14-year-old activist who was shot for advocating girls' education in Pakistan.
Right. So Malala was, moderately educated, and she taught, some of the Afghan kids about different things, including Islam and knowledge. And she was shot by Taliban, but now she's fine. After the surgery and stuff in London. But the story about it is about some of the Talibans, they don't like women and girls out of home, and including education. So women for them have to be covered, and this different kind of cover. I mean, really, it's called niqab, so it's not hijab like you have a face, but it's The full cover, right? So Taliban's. So in other words, this is one example of a regional interpretation. So it's regional interpretations of a version of Taliban. Taliban itself in Arabic means students, pupil. Yeah. But then it becomes an organization, like a movement. And it was during the time of Soviet Union and so forth. There was political context in the creation of Taliban becoming a political movement. But in general, it was school. It was school, students, like in madrasa, for example. Okay, so this is only regional context, and everywhere in the world you have both girls and boys being educated. And everywhere in the Muslim world you have boys and girls educated, both Islam and social sciences, or what we would call secular sciences. Math, biology, and all this we know in the US, in Europe, are actually also taught in madrasa. Okay, so this is really regional.
Okay. So is it possible I can add a little something to that?
Yeah.
Okay. In our beliefs, and also Brother Suhail and Mr. Muhammad, you may agree or disagree with me. It says in the Quran that every woman and man should study, should get educated. Okay. Does it say that?
It's a hadith and
It's
in the Quran.
It's in the hadith.
Okay, it's a hadith. So every man and woman has the right to study whatever they choose. Okay.
One thing I think is necessary to be pointed out, and we really haven't touched on it, but in every religion there are extremists. Christianity has its people who kill abortion doctors. So would you call the Taliban and their activities, say in Afghanistan, etc., an example of extreme fringe?
So Lee, would you like to take that question, please?
Well, there is the tabligh, there is the Quran. The Quran talks about wasata, ummatan wasata. Ummatan wasata means a middle pathway. So in other words, moderation. In other words, this is because human beings are either or. They tend to be either so, falling short of something, or so into something, obsessed into something. So this is what we call in the West extremists. They don't call themselves extremists. They call themselves as true Muslims. But in terms of mainstream Islam, right? Most Muslims would reject this, interpretation of denying education to girls and women. So you can call them, extremists or whatever language that we like. But in general, the mainstream Islam would say that, as you said before, according to Hadith, that طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلمة. Seeking knowledge is an obligation for both Muslim men and women. So that's the Hadith. But again, I agree with you. All religions.
Other questions?
Very quick, Mr. Suhail.
Any more questions?
I have a quick question. Is there a particular reason why Shiites are concentrated in Iran?
Suhail or Mr. Ali?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Historically speaking. Historically speaking.
Yeah. So why are they concentrated there?
Right, it's Persian. It's Persian civilization. So Iran was Persian civilization. So you had the Fatimid from Egypt, first of all. So Fatimid Fatimid is a Shiite, dynasty. Okay. So from Egypt, you had the spread of Islam to Persian civilizations, to Iran, and they become strong there. But then Egypt becomes Sunni instead of Shiite. Right? So you had politics. So this is the rule of politics in making society either Sunni and Shiite. Second of all, is culturally speaking. So in Persian civilization, you have Zoroastrianism. So Zoroastrianism also had this idea of Mahdiism. Mahdi is the one that, Messiah, in Christian tradition, Messiah. So this idea of Imam or hidden Imam was very much in relation
Already
to
in the culture.
already in the culture. So there are two explanations, political and cultural.
I just would like to add something regarding your question about women education and When I talk to people about Islam, a lot of them are confused and they do not distinguish between cultural, tribal things and Islam. For example, last year I went to Saudi Arabia to do the pilgrimage, and I was shocked. Saudi Arabia, this is the land of Islam. This is where Islam was born, and it's far away from the Islamic values. And when I came to this country, I found this country is closer to the Islamic values than Saudi Arabia itself. A famous scholar called Muhammad Abdu, he traveled the East and the West. And when he came back from both trips, he summed it up with two statements. He said, I went to the West and I saw Islam without Muslims. I went to the East and I saw Muslims without Islam. And I assure you, there's more Islamic values in the West, and in this society in particular, than Saudi Arabia, than Iran, than Iraq, than all these countries. Islam is not confined or limited into a geographical area. Islam does not exist in a collective form nowadays. It does exist on an individual level. You find good Muslims everywhere and bad Muslims everywhere. And when you talk about these things, you're talking about education and women. Yes, Islam encouraged education. And our Prophet said seek knowledge from the mahd till lahd, which means seek knowledge and be a student of knowledge from the day you're born until the day you die. So we all die in a state of education. We're educating ourselves. We always learn something new every day.
A city, so بدون مثال city, there's 15
Any other questions to close it up? Yeah, go ahead.
Since 9/11, are you seeing more prejudice against your religion? Any particular area in education or needing help in any organization to understand what's going on? Do you see more prejudice?
I actually moved here in 2001, October 23rd, 2001, which was really like right after 9/11. And ever since, like, I stepped out of the airplane, I was like treated completely different to the point that my clothes and everything just taken piece by piece, and I was like ordered to put everything back together on my own. And we actually missed a flight that day. And also went to high school here, and I was basically separated from everyone else. You know, everybody looked at me different. Nobody would speak to me, talk to me, or anything. So it all depends where you live in the U.S. Like I lived in the east coast, like in Indiana and Georgia now. Then moved to the south to Georgia, and it differed. Like from Indiana to Georgia, when I moved, I found it more the southern hospitality. People were more, you know, not prejudiced as Indiana or up north. So it all depends where you live.
I just want to add to that. Homeland Security has a list of about 24 countries which have Muslim population that have restrictions based on names. So you had an Arabic name like myself. Yeah, I got trouble when you're out or into the United States. So it happens to me too. So because of your name and you are men, in certain age, productive age like 20 until I think 40 or something. But I was right after 2011. But then it's now becoming less and less, and reduced because of the situation's changed. Yeah.
If I may add
And then I think Gary has a question.
No, I wanted to add on to what he said.
Oh, okay.
All human beings are prejudiced and racist to a certain extent somehow. No exception. Everybody thinks, my mom, she used to tell me when God divided money, he could not satisfy anybody. But when he divided the brain, he satisfied all of us. Because we all think we're right and everybody else is wrong, but we never have enough money. It's great. This is a human nature. And my mom, she's not educated, but she was so well put when I thought about it, okay? So we are racist to a certain extent. We all think we have the best religion, and everybody else is less than our religion. We have the best culture, we have the best accent, we have the best skin color, and everybody else. So when you encounter some sort of a racism in this country, you have to approach it based on this ground, that I'm a racist too, okay? So you have to approach like that, and that makes it easier for you to solve and diffuse the situation. Yes, we faced a lot of challenges, legal challenges, social challenges, psychological challenges in this country. But a lot of this rests on the shoulders of the Muslims who hide their identity in this country, who changed their name from Muhammad to Mike. Nobody wants to know, I don't want to be this 9/11. No, you need to get out and explain yourself. Don't change your name, emphasize your identity and explain yourself. Then Islamophobia will go away. You don't hide in the shadow. You have freedom of speech, exercise it. You have freedom of assembly, exercise it. You have freedom of press, exercise it. Use all of the tools that this great system, we love the flag, we love the Constitution. We might have some question marks about the Americans' foreign policies and how they conduct themselves in the Middle East, but we love this country, we love it from our hearts. And we distinguish between the government, the flag, and the Constitution. And I always say this, there's two Americas. There's the foreign policy aspect of it, and there's the flag and the Constitution. And I was shocked and amazed how nice and educated and welcoming and warm the American people are. And when I identify myself after a Muslim and such, I say I am an American because I do not want to be a Palestinian in Palestine, and neither I want to be a Jordanian in Jordan or an Egyptian in Egypt. Even if there's a Palestinian state tomorrow morning, I have a lot of question marks. What kind of a life I'm going to have in it? The quality of life. That's what I said. Here is the Islamic value more than the East. And be assured that we are more Muslims in this country and we implement more Islamic values. As far as implementation, I don't know about the theory, the oneness and the unity of God, but as far as implementation, we are more Muslim in this country based on my understanding, limited understanding to Islam, than the people who claim to be Muslims in the East.
Gary, did you want to?
Yeah, it actually, I think, marries up to both of what they said. There's a positive side to 9/11, and that's that educators are given this opportunity to shine a positive light on Islam. I teach world history classes, and it gives me a natural forum to speak about it. And so I think that's what's part of the dimming down of the prejudice and stuff, is that we now have the opportunity to talk about it and to educate people.
Very true. That's very true. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
The last statement that I'm going to make of today is, in America, we have different religions. We have Christians, we have Jews, we have any type of religion, Muslims, okay? Why we cannot live happily together in peace, okay? Regardless of your faith, regardless of your skin color, and regardless of where you came from, okay? We're here as Americans as you. We have rights, same as you. Everyone has freedom, including we. Okay, do not hurt anyone because of their religion or because of how they look. In the Quran it says, if you hurt a human soul, it's like you hurt a human society. If you help human soul, it's like you help the human society. It's in chapter 5, verse 32. Okay, you can check that. Okay, we are here as one people. We are not here to judge you or judge myself. It's up to God. God is here to judge everyone. He's here as a test, how we treat another human soul. It's a test for us, how we treat each other in this year and the year after.
People have to get to class, so.
Thank you so much. As the president of the Political Science Club, I'd like to thank Dr. Ali and our great panel. What an extraordinary job you did. Let's give them a big round of applause. And I would also like to thank Dr. Chapin and Professor Melch for making this possible. And thank you for taking the time. Take care, everybody. Have a good class.
Thank you.